Have you ever witnessed such a fun survival experience on a deserted island? With gorgeous women around catching prey by day 2, these pufferfish are a few pounds each and plentiful. A feast of grilled meat until you're stuffed. Survive for 21 days and you'll get $100,000. The contestants probably laughed themselves awake from their dreams. On day 2, Brent used a magnifying glass to start a fire and then explored around the shelter. He discovered a pufferfish in a concealed spot. It's a protein jackpot, but it's pretty smart. But it was hiding under a rock. Brent slowly used a stick to pin the pufferfish. It was so easy to control the prey. Next, he simply grabbed the pufferfish's tail and pulled. No need to worry about hurting it. In pain, the pufferfish would eventually let go. Brent kept tugging and hitting until he got it out. Its shell was tough like an armadillo's. Brent pinned the pufferfish with a stick. Both were stubborn, locked in a skillful duel. Brent snapped the pufferfish's spine with the stick, leaving it defenseless. Though he won, he deeply regretted his actions, feeling he had acted too hastily. Guilt washed over him and tears welled up in his eyes. This pufferfish weighed a few pounds and could serve as dinner. Brent carried the meat back to the shelter. His teammates didn't seem too surprised, likely because they weren't hungry yet. Kara, however, felt a bit disgusted, because she's a vegetarian. It does sound absurd, a vegetarian in a survival show. Even Nain was surprised, but Kara knew surviving without meat would be tough in this situation. Next, they had to figure out how to deal with the few pounds of meat. Nain used the fan blades to make a knife, one side as a saw, the other as a knife. Brent tried to open the pufferfish's belly, but Nain's knife barely made a dent. The belly was thicker than Nain's face. Nain couldn't believe it. The thickness was comparable to the foundation on his wife's face. Nain struggled to cut it, but it had no effect. In the end, they just broke the shell open. Catching it wasn't this hard, but butchering it almost strangled Brent. 5 kilometers away, Justin's team reached the mangrove bay. It was low tide, and they weren't here to catch seafood, but to pick up some coconuts and useful trash that had drifted ashore. Cher found a comb and a fishing net. Justin wasted no time combing his hair, knowing he was with 2 girls. They could miss meals, but their hair had to look perfect. He relied on his hairstyle to charm the 2 girls. Justin and the girls kept searching in the water. Currently, they had no shelter, and food was even more scarce. They discovered an abandoned boat, which was just an empty shell. But it was still very useful to them. They scavenged for usable supplies on the boat and found an old battery. It might be enough to start a fire. Shell also found an iron pot, which could be used to boil water and cook food. While Justin was climbing the tree to get the pot, he saw a bird nearby. It looked quite silly. Its wings seemed to be broken, probably seeking human help. The girls, Candace and Shell, felt pity for it. They found the bird adorable and, since it was only the second day, they weren't hungry yet. The bird even swam towards them. Candace waded in to get closer, and they soon caught the injured bird. They tied it up with a rope. The bird probably couldn't understand what was happening. They covered it with a lid to keep it. Candace planned to come back and save it after they made a fire. Meanwhile, 12 kilometers away, Andrew's group was building a shelter. Andrew was doing most of the work while Amber and Trick messed around. They failed to make a fire last night, got bitten by mosquitoes, and couldn't sleep. Today, they were still struggling to make a fire. They probably didn't know how to start one. They continued to gather useful items in the jungle. Amber found a helmet, likely left from a battle, which could be used as an iron pot. If they could make a fire, they could boil water. Trick found a small cup and a mirror, which made Andrew very excited. The mirror could be used to start a fire, and he was very grateful for it. With the mirror, Andrew felt like a man again. Next, they prepared to make a fire. Shell gave fire making a shot too, using a battery. The idea was straightforward: short-circuit the battery to generate heat. Connect the battery's positive and negative terminals with a metal piece to make it conduct electricity and overheat. Using resistance would produce sparks. It would create sparks. Shell put the battery in the tinder, but even though the metal piece heated up, it couldn't light the tinder. Candace and Justin came to assist. The girls felt guilty about the fire not starting yet, worried about the bird suffering under the lid. At this moment, they were still struggling to make a fire. Candace had to go outside to look for more materials, while Andrew's group had already started using a mirror to ignite a fire. But it's not as good as a magnifying glass. A flat mirror is relatively hard to focus with. They tried dripping water on the mirror to use the water to focus the sunlight. This method works, but it requires direct sunlight. If the mirror isn't level, the water will just run off. They were wasting time with this. They might as well have just started a fire by friction. Right now, they have enough water and shelter, so they should focus on daily survival. Poland was already dealing with prey, a ballfish weighing a few pounds, and after gutting, there was a shell left. It's 2.9 pounds of pee and fart, and I thought I could have a full meal, and there wasn't much meat after the shell was removed. But no matter what, Brent's group was the first to make a fire and enjoy grilled meat. Meanwhile, Andrew and Amber are asleep in the shelter. Kirk steps out and discovers a bird's nest perfect for tinder. They attempt fire making again, this time using bamboo sticks. They put the tinder inside the bamboo and rub 2 bamboo sticks quickly. The heat built up at the bamboo's opening. If you create enough friction, you can start a fire. Andrew explained this to Amber, thinking she'd give it a shot, but it turned out he was doing it himself while Amber watched. In the end, his hands were exhausted, so he had to take turns with Trick. The two of them kept trying. Even with all our hard work, we couldn't get a fire going, leaving everyone really disappointed. Candace went looking for fire-starting materials and found steel wool, perfect for igniting with a battery. If they can start a fire now, they will have everything they need. Just place the steel wool into the tinder and use the battery to ignite it directly. A miraculous moment happened, they got a spark and made a fire. Now, they can boil water to drink. They could save the hoofed fox, but when they checked, the tide had risen, trapping it inside. The fox drowned. Although they said sorry, they all knew what the fox's death really meant. A barbecue feast seemed certain. Andrew's team is the only one still without fire, despite Andrew's best efforts. But he still couldn't get a fire going. He knew that without fire, they wouldn't have warmth at night. So, they tried a fourth method to start a fire. They tried the old-school method of rubbing sticks together to make embers. It's a big energy drain. They took turns with the sticks, but still couldn't get a fire going. They began to lose hope. Meanwhile, the girls went from saving the bird to butchering it, with Candace sharpening stones for tools. This bird has more meat than Brent's pufferfish. This roasted meat feast will surely fill them up. I don't get this. Candace said she's a vegetarian but mentioned needing to eat meat to survive in the wild. But to be so proactive in butchering this bird? The bird has a lot of meat, probably enough to last them over 5 days. The girls' group might not be the strongest, but their luck is incredible. Candace swiftly prepared the bird. Brent's group roasted the pufferfish and were lost in the joy of eating it, even without seasoning. But when you're starving, anything tastes amazing. The fish lasted for 2 meals, but right after they ate, a swarm of mosquitoes showed up. The mosquitoes' buzzing spoiled their meal, just like it did for Candace's group, who also had a ton of mosquitoes. But the roasted meat was amazing. Andrew's group had it the worst. They couldn't even start a fire, let alone enjoy roasted meat. The camera captured swarms of mosquitoes. Nights were a nightmare, with contestants unable to sleep, constantly scratching and swatting. Nighttime was even scarier than daytime. All the teams couldn't avoid the mosquito army at night. It was now the 3rd day. Most nights were spent swatting mosquitoes, with ticks biting their skin. The bugs here were truly terrifying. Today's goal remained making a fire. Brent's group had one last night, but it didn't deter the mosquitoes. Today, they aim to tweak their shelter to fend off mosquitoes by digging a fire pit around it. They used the fire's heat to repel mosquitoes and spread last night's ashes on the ground to deter ticks. Kara appreciated having 2 teammates who worked well together. They were doing pretty well now. Candace's group woke up early and had roasted meat for breakfast. Their biggest problem was the termites on the ground. This had its pros and cons. They decided to locate a termite nest. Burning it releases camphor, which helps fumigate insects. In short, the termite nest smell can keep mosquitoes away. They cracked it open and brought it back to their shelter for this purpose. Trick was still worried about making a fire. They kept looking for suitable fire-starting materials and found a stream. The flowing water seems safe, but drinking it directly could be risky. Trick is wandering aimlessly. He suddenly sees a wild boar nearby. With so many animals around, there's plenty of protein if you know what you're doing. Andrew and Amber are arguing in the shelter. Amber insists on making a fire first, but Andrew and the others are always tied up with other tasks. It's not like Andrew doesn't want to make a fire. They've tried many ways but failed. You can't really fault them for that. But since Amber's a girl, she can't be blamed. The guys are at fault. Trick heads back to the shelter and informs them about the wild boar. Amber and the others are napping in the shelter when they suddenly hear rustling from the trees. Trick is clueless about what's happening. A large tree is falling. They jump up in fright, but luckily, the tree doesn't hit them. The fallen tree can provide them with plenty of firewood. Will they finally get a fire going next episode? Don't miss the next update.